I'm going to be reacting to some of the things that happened in week 7 of this college football season. So, my thoughts on the biggest game yesterday, Ohio State and Oregon, is that Dylan Gabriel should win the Heisman Trophy this year. He had an amazing performance against what is probably the best secondary in the country. And you can tell me in the comments, well, Ohio State's just overrated this year. But their secondary, I do know, has a whole lot of talent and experience. And Dylan Gabriel threw for 341 yards on them. And Oregon does deserve a lot of credit for getting the win. And I think both teams are very similar. They're two of the best teams in the country, obviously. But I still think that Ohio State is the better team than Oregon is. And if they play again, which I'm almost sure they will, I will pick Ohio State. Ohio State's no doubt going to win the rest of their games, which will put them in the conference championship. They'll, of course, beat Michigan because Michigan doesn't have an offense this year. And then I have no doubt they'll beat Penn State. Penn State is, I think, just what they were these last couple of years, a good team, but not a great team. They had to go into overtime to beat USC, who turned out to not be that good this year. And then Oregon will either go undefeated or maybe they'll get upset once. But uh, either way, they will go to the conference championship because they don't have to play Penn State. And my preseason predictions, I did pick Oregon to win this game against Ohio State, and then I picked Ohio State to win a rematch in the Big Ten championship with Oregon, and then I picked them to play again in a college football playoff game, and then Ohio State to beat them again and go on to win the national championship. And I think there's a good chance that I'm still going to be right on that because Oregon only won the game by 1 point, 32-31, and they were at home, and Oregon has a big home field advantage. So if Ohio State had been the home team, it almost certainly would have gone their way. And then Ole Miss broke my heart again. They lost to LSU in overtime at 29-26. Even though they looked like the better team in that game, they made so many mistakes that ended up costing them the game. And Ole Miss, I'm almost sure now is not going to make the college football playoff because even though I know with only 2 losses, if they won the rest of their games, they would get a playoff spot. I have no confidence that they're going to do that. I'm almost sure they will lose to Georgia, which will put them out of the college football playoff. Even though Georgia isn't as good as I thought they were going to be, and their defense played like crap yesterday, giving up 31 points to some high school team called Mississippi State. Knowing my luck, Georgia's defense when they play Ole Miss will play like their 2021 defense, and I still think that Ole Miss is a better team than LSU is. LSU has a huge home field advantage and only winning in overtime. I'm pretty sure Ole Miss would win on a neutral field. So Ole Miss against LSU is similar in a way to Alabama against Georgia, and it's different in a way. It's similar in the way that LSU does own Ole Miss partly, but they don't own them everywhere like Alabama owns Georgia. They just own Ole Miss in Baton Rouge. For some reason, Ole Miss doesn't have the ability of winning in Baton Rouge. They've beaten them in Oxford many times, like last season, but they have never beaten them in Baton Rouge since I've been watching football, which has been a long time. And of course, I know it's really hard to win at LSU, but pretty much everyone I think that has played them yearly for the past like 15 years. has beat them at least once in a Baton Rouge. So it can be done, just not by Ole Miss, and I'll never pick them to do it again until I see them do it. I don't care if Ole Miss has just won the national championship and LSU is coming off of a 6-win season. If the game's in Baton Rouge, I'll pick LSU. And Ole Miss, their big problem this year seems to be their offensive line. So they were supposed to be a lot better at the line of scrimmage this year, and they are on the defensive line. Their defensive line is so good, but their offensive line, even though they have better players, I'm not noticing a difference from last year. It is still uh, not very good. And Ole Miss's defense as a whole is very good, much better than last year's. I think, and they've got great wide receivers and a great quarterback and a couple of good running backs. So it's so disappointing that had to happen to them this year when they had all this hype going into the season. But it was nice to see Ulysses Bentley back at running back for Ole Miss. He, for some reason, hasn't hardly played up until yesterday. I don't know if it was an injury or some other issue, but he needs to be their starting running back the rest of this season. I think he's a better running back than Henry Parrish is. He was a really good running back. He was the backup to Quinshon Judkins last year, so I thought he'd be their starting running back this season. And at times last season, he looked even better than Judkins did. And then Lane Kiffin, I still think is a good coach, the best coach that Ole Miss has had at least since I've been watching football, which they've had several different coaches since then, but I just still don't really think he's an elite football coach right now. And I'm going to go and tell you, though, that I think that Texas is going to beat Georgia next Saturday, but I do think Georgia will still find a way to get into the college football playoff. Texas right now would be my pick to win the SEC championship. They blew out Oklahoma 34-3. Now, Oklahoma, I know, doesn't have offense this year. They've got so many injuries and a freshman quarterback, but they do have a very good defense. So Texas's offense has been tested. I think they'll be able to score quite a bit on Georgia, but Georgia, of course, will be able to score on them too because unlike Oklahoma, they have an offense. And LSU, I wouldn't be surprised if they go to the SEC championship this year. I think they have a very good chance to beat Alabama. Alabama had another terrible performance, just barely getting by South Carolina 27-25 at home. They were lucky to win that game. I just don't think that Kalen DeBoer is fit to be a dominant SEC head coach. To coach in the SEC is a lot more difficult and a lot different than coaching in any other uh, conference. And it seems like he isn't really involved much in the game time coaching like Nick Saban was. Nick Saban had coordinators that would call plays, but he was in charge of it. DeBoer, it looks like when I've seen him on the sidelines that he could fall asleep, and it doesn't seem like Kalen DeBoer has control over his team because there was something weird that happened in the Vanderbilt game with Malachi Moore, who is Alabama's only good defensive back that they have left. Kalen DeBoer told him to come out of the game for a little while, and then Malachi Moore told him go back to the sideline. I'm not coming out of the game. And then DeBoer went back to the sideline and was just like, well, whatever you say is what I'll do. And if that would have been Nick Saban, he would have told them, well, then if you don't want to come out of the game, then you can come out of the team. And he obviously wouldn't have done that with Nick Saban because he knew that Nick Saban would do what I just said he would do. But uh, Kalen DeBoer seems to be soft with his players. Alabama just does not look like a playoff team to me. And then my opinion of Tennessee is getting worse every week. They just barely survived in overtime. A terrible Florida team, 23-17. Tennessee's offense, it turns out, is just terrible this year. And my opinion of their quarterback, Nico, I'm about to leave you, is uh, continuing to get worse this season. So at first, when they were scoring a ton of points on these little teams in NC State, I thought that he was maybe going to be a good quarterback. But then after the Arkansas game, where he played terrible. I thought, of course, that was a bad game, but I thought that he was probably going to do better this week, and he was probably just about an average quarterback, but he was not any better this week. He had 169 yards passing, which is terrible, and he's supposed to be a good running quarterback, but he had 1 yard rushing on 8 carries. So he was a total bust for Tennessee. He looks like one of the worst quarterbacks in the conference this season. But that will be it with this video. And please subscribe and thanks for watching. And I'll be back soon.